Right, so our next task is solving quadratic equations, but more specifically when a is equal to 1. So, meaning the coefficient of your x squared here is 1. Also, not just any quadratic equation, but more on trinomial, okay? Although you can also use this with binomial quadratic functions, but as you can see, my examples here are all trinomial. You have three terms and then everything is equal to zero. So this is actually a simplified version. Whenever you're solving for any polynomial wherein the degree, the highest exponent, is not equal to 1, you have to set it equal to 0. So right now it's already set up to 0. So for instance, your assignment, your problem is like this: x squared plus 5x equals 3. Then this is not set to 0. So therefore you need to set it first to 0. That would become x squared plus 5x minus 3 equals 0. This is then you can start solving when the other side is now equal to 0. Okay, so that is for any equation wherein the degree or the highest exponent is greater than 1. In this case, since this is a quadratic function, then the degree of these equations is 2. Okay, all of them are 2. So that's why it's called quadratic. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is basically review the coefficients. So a equals b equals and c equals. Okay, so a is the coefficient of your x squared, b is the coefficient of your x including the sign, and c is the constant after everything is set equal to 0. Okay, so we'll do number one. We have this tool that I learned from one of my students in the past. So you have this big x tool. On top here you will put the value of c, and at the bottom you'll put the value of b. And what this means is that the c, for instance, for number one is positive 20, and the b for number one is negative 9, right? So I need you to think of two numbers that when you multiply will give you that value of c, but when you add will give you that value of b, in this case 9, right? Or negative 9. Okay, so let's think about that. Let's look for two numbers that will multiply 20. Well, like we can do 10 times 2, right? 10 times 2 is 20, but when you add them, that's going to be positive 12, not even 9. How about negative 10 and negative 2? When you multiply that, that's going to give you positive 20, but when you add it, it's going to give you negative 12. So you need to look for another factor, okay? Another set of factors. Well, you can do 5 and 4, right? 5 times 4 is 20. Good. 5 plus 4 is positive 9. We want negative 9. So therefore, this must be both negative. Okay, so let's try that. Negative 5 and negative 4. Now, you have to double check. Negative 5 times negative 4. Yes, that's a positive 20. Negative 9 plus negative 4. Yes, that's a negative 9. So this gives you those two factors. These two right here are the two numbers that we're looking for. So now that you have that problem, I'm going to copy the problem. X squared minus 9x plus 20 equals 0. We will prepare two parentheses for the factors, okay? So each one of here will have, if each one of these will have x because your variable is x. Now there goes a number with that x, and these numbers are this one right here, including the sign. So therefore, the first one is x minus 5, and the second one is x minus 4 equals 0. Now you have two factors here, so you can separately solve for them. X minus 5 equals 0, and x minus 4 equals 0. We can both set each one of them equal to 0, because just imagine if the first factor is 0, any number multiplied to it will always give you a 0, right? So therefore, any one of these factors can be 0. That's why we can equate them to 0. So solve them separately. Plus 5 plus 5. So x equals 5. That's your first answer. And the next one is plus 4 x equals 4. This is your second answer. So you can see you have two answers because again the degree is 2, so therefore you should be expecting two answers. Okay, so why don't you try do the same thing with number 2 and see if we have the same answers. Okay, all right, so I'm gonna erase this. I need to change this so that I can, it's a little bit wider. All right, so now I'm gonna do number two. Okay, now I'm not saying everything can be solved this way, but this is a good, neat way to solve it. Okay, so this is x squared plus 4x plus 5 equals 0. So now I'm going to put it here. So the number on top will be 5 because that's my c. The number at the bottom is 4. So now I'm going to think of two numbers that when I multiply will give me 5. Okay, so that will be 5 times 1, but when you add that, that's going to be 6. So that's not it. How about negative 5, negative 1? When you add it, it's negative 6. Is there any other factor of 5 that are whole numbers? Okay. No, not really. So therefore, what this means is that this we cannot solve it using this manner. That's basically what, because you're stuck with, we already tried all the possible factors and none of them actually worked. So if you get stuck and you can't solve it using this method, then you will have to use the Pythagorean theorem. No, not Pythagorean theorem, sorry. You're going to have to use the quadratic formula, okay? And what is the quadratic formula? It's the one that says x equals negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, okay? So the quadratic formula, you can always use it no matter what kind of equation you have. If you cannot solve it using this method, then the go-to formula is this one, okay? All right, so now let's substitute. For this one, your A is equal to 1, your B is 4, and your C is equal to 5, okay? So I'm going to substitute from this one here. It says x equals negative b. So whatever is my b, opposite of that. So that's going to be negative 4 plus or minus square root of b squared. Well, 4 squared is 16 minus 4 times 1 times 5. Okay, and this will be all over 2 times 1. Okay, solving the thing, the value inside the radical sign. So x equals negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 4 times 1 times 5, that's 20, right? 16 minus 20, that's negative 4 all over 2. Okay, now if you do use your calculator when you do a square root of negative, that will give you an error. That's because this is not a real number. When you extract this, the square root of a negative number, that's gonna be an imaginary number. So when we say imaginary number, really what I'm saying is you just take the square root of that number and then you put an I. Okay, so that's gonna be x equals plus or minus. Oh, I forgot the negative 4. I need to do the negative 4 first. Where is my? Okay, so it's gonna be. Oh my gosh, I can't find my. I'm sorry about my dogs. Negative 4 plus or minus the square root of this 4 right here is 2, but it's a negative, so you put an I all over 2. Okay, so that means you can actually separate them now, right? So there's an I here, but also you can also simplify. So I'm gonna put my final answer here. So x, you have two of them. The x sub 1 is negative 4 plus 2i all over 2. So I'm taking the plus part. And then the second one is Ernie. Shh. Sorry about my dog. He's very excited. Minus 2i all over 2. Now you can simplify this because the 4, 2, and this 2 can all be divided by 2, right? So negative 4 divided by 2. You cannot just divide 4 and 2, these two, this and that. You cannot just do that because they're all together, okay? So you can divide all of them by 2, so you will have negative 2 plus I all over 1, or just basically you don't have that's all over 1, so you don't even have to write this. Again, divide everything by 2 on the second one, so you have negative 2 minus I all over 1. So therefore, these are your final answers for the first one. It's kind of long because you will have to use the quadratic formula. Okay, now let's do the third one. All right, why don't you try the third one? See if you can use it using, or you can solve it using our first method, the one with the big X. Okay, and we can compare our answers. All right, so I'm gonna do number 3. x squared minus x minus 20 equals 0. So I'm going to do the big X, negative 20 here, and then negative 1 here. Two numbers that can multiply 20 but will give you negative 1. So you could have negative 10 and 2. When you add, that's not negative 1. How about negative 5 and 4? That will give you negative 20, and when you add, will give you negative 1. So therefore, those are those two numbers that we're looking for, negative 5 and positive 4. So now you can create two parentheses here. This is an easier one. So x, that number right there, minus 5, and x plus 4. So now you have two factors. You can separate them and solve them separately. All right, x plus 4 equals 0. So I'm going to add 5. Oh my goodness. X equals 5. And then minus 4, x equals negative 4. Again, you have two answers because your degree is 2. I'm going to leave number 4 as my challenge question. See if you can solve it using this x method or if you need to use quadratic formula.